Hi, everybody. It's day 4 for our Not Back to School series, how to help you really strengthen your foundation and be able to deal with this wave that sweeps the world, at least our country for right now. Other countries maybe don't start school at this exact time, which I learned yesterday in the video. But it'll be helpful no matter what, because especially today, because today we're dealing with our critics. So I'm going to give everybody a chance to kind of hop on in here. I had a kind of frantic morning, so I didn't do all my usual let people know that we're doing this. So we might not have as many live questions, but that's okay, because after we started homeschooling in 1996. So after 22 years of listening to people and having my own feelings of insecurity or worry, I know what the questions are. So we'll talk about it. And let me know if you're here. Say hi. Hello, Christina. Welcome. Right now, I think it's just you and me. But I would imagine others will kind of trickle in. I want to help you guys figure out what's the best plan of attack when you have critics in your life about this educational path that you're choosing that's a little unconventional, you know? And one of the things that everybody is conditioned to do because they've been in school is fall in line and don't rock the boat. And that is what we sometimes, you go to these family reunions and you think my sheer presence is rocking the boat or becoming problematic for people. So let's talk about what's going on there. Let me know where you're from, what time it is, whether you're having trouble with critics and naysayers in your life, whether the critic is really in your own head, because sometimes they don't say it and it's our own worries that are the problem. So let me know if that's happening, and I'll read through the comments, and I have some notes and we'll talk about it. There are a couple of things I want to make sure. I hope you signed up, because you will have gotten some more little handouts that go with this. And we'll kind of touch on some of these things. And on the last page, I gave you some links that will help you, that will, and actually there's more than that, but it's a good start. Sometimes it's better to not overwhelm people with 22 years of writing. Anyway, so check out the handout. If you have sent me your email through that tiny.cc/notbacktoschool. That's the link, and that way you can have this to work through, because dealing with critics has to do with overcoming fear. And overcoming fear is done 2 ways: more knowledge, more support. That's all it is. That way just like you have a kid that's afraid of something in the closet, more knowledge, turn on the light, see that there's nothing there. Or maybe you need more knowledge because you need to be able to know some answers. Maybe they're saying some fears that you have, or that you just haven't knocked all the way out of the park. Maybe their fear, it's still like at a 9 and yours is at a 3, but you want to get rid of those 3 so that you can be confident. Christina says, I'm from India. It just passed noon. I'm new to the unschooling methods, and I'm excited but also nervous, and I'm excited for live. Me too. It's exciting to do this. I'm so happy that we're able to. Hopefully you were able to do the other ones too, because they're on the page. I think I've put them over in the event so that you don't have to scroll through all of the memes that I keep throwing out there, or articles, or different inspiring things. But that way it's all kind of encapsulated, so that'll be easy. And I may end up putting it somewhere so that anybody that needs to get this extra support can get it. I don't know. We'll see. Big plans. Me and my big plans. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what you're afraid of. Is your fear coming from that you're afraid that you don't know what you're doing? Because if that's the case, I want to tell you that's a general parenting fear we all have. And a lot of times we have a feeling and we move towards it, and then we gather more information. So don't let your fear immobilize you. Don't let your fear be the kind of thing that keeps you from making this choice. Long time ago, there was an unschooling mom named Maura Seeker, and she wrote this thing and said, when I started unschooling, I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like I tucked one kid under each arm, and then we jumped off the cliff, and who knew I had wings. So that is like the visual I want you to have for how this can go. And that means we've got to deal with these fears so that you can fly. And you've got a great adventure ahead. Don't let people and their criticisms make you play small. Play big. Do this with your kids. Because the truth of the matter is, school will always take you back. You pay taxes. And that was sometimes the response that I gave to people when they were like, I think this is a terrible idea and you're going to ruin the kids and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, we'll do this until it doesn't work because they'll take us back. And so I think that sometimes what helps is to recognize that being defensive is probably not going to work, because most people really don't want to be convinced that you're right and they're wrong. Most people don't really like that. And so better to just go for they want to be heard, because that's a general human thing that we just want to make sure you've heard us or you've considered the concern that we have, because maybe what we should do is think about that they are coming to us from a really earnest place, that they are worried for our children. And if that's the case, you want to have a little compassion. You want to say, I've considered that, or, oh, that's a good thing to consider. Or I've read up on this a lot and I have really decided this is what we're going to do. And sometimes the more confident you can say that, the more confidently you can say that, the more they fall away. Because it's like sharks in the water, they can smell if you feel underconfident, because then that's where they're trying to get in at you. And so don't show them that. That's a Brene Brown thing, if you haven't read any of her stuff about vulnerability, that we only have to show our vulnerability to the people we trust. We do not have to show it to everyone. We have to show it. We can show it to people who we know have good intentions for us, or who care about what we're doing and value our choices. And those would be people we would go ahead and share a little more information. But if really they're just trying to defend their choice and they're trying to get you back in line and they're trying to make things all compartmentalized the way they want it, those people are not your concern. Those people, you just need a door out. You need a way to get away from them. And I don't mean permanently, because, for a while it was my mother. So, it's not going to be a permanent thing, but it is going to be we don't talk about this thing. We talk about something else. And so not getting into an argument about it, especially if they have kids, because they maybe don't want to do this. And so they don't want to feel bad about doing this, about our doing this. And so, not aiming at them. You don't want to do that. But it is better to just say, I've thought about it. We have really explored this. And you'd just be surprised how many resources are out there for people now. And, it's just not like how it was when we were kids. Just say that. You don't have to become the unschooling poster parent. You don't have to do that. We don't need that. Nobody needs that. And you can just be who you are and say, just like people choose private schools or choose other kinds of ways to learn, I want to choose this for a while. We're having a lot of fun with it. And if you tell them, we'll do it until it doesn't work, I'm open-minded to the idea that we're just being flexible as we're coming into this. That way they know you're still like, you haven't just like drank the Kool-Aid and now you're off on, I think that's what they're afraid of, that it's going to be like you've become part of a cult and you no longer think independently. And when in fact, you are thinking independently. That's what has put you at a differing place with them. So that's something to consider. Let's see. Hi, Jamie, and Ohio and Colorado. Fabulous. I'm so excited you guys are here. I love that. Let's see. Over at I have on the back page of your handout, if you have that, you'll see that I have links to the blog and links to a Naysayer video that I did up at YouTube, which is really helpful no matter when. I wrote it before Thanksgiving a few years ago as people were getting ready to go have family gatherings. And it'll help you no matter whether you have a family gathering coming up or not. I had a few people write to me and say, oh my gosh, we're doing this family thing on Labor Day. I'm so glad to hear this is coming. And watch the video because that will help too. And but we talked a couple minutes ago about dealing with our own fears and dealing with gathering knowledge. And over at the Unschooling Mom to Mom website, if you look around in there, there's a section called "But What About?" ... with a question mark, and in that you'll see all the things that people worry about. You know, all the things that people come to our group with questions. And what I've done is collected a bunch of articles that are all on that topic. So I've already kind of done your legwork for you. So check that out too as a way to get some more information, because that's the other way to deal with fear, is to get more knowledge. And that's sometimes why it's so hard, especially if it's in the beginning and you aren't sure about what you're doing and you just feel like it's right and you're going to move forward. That's why it's sometimes hard, because you really haven't strengthened that foundation yet. It will come, but it doesn't come like overnight. You don't like stay up all night one weekend and read a ton and now you know everything there is to know. That's not how it works, because some of the stuff you have to kind of undo in yourself, because we've had all this conditioning from school on what is legitimate learning, what is important. And it's really kind of often very opposite of what we know. That we know that kids learn when they follow their interests and they get to explore things that they're curious about. We know that kids learn more and retain more when they do that, but schools aren't set up for that. We know that that learning those set academics are not as important as learning what's in your world right now. That's going to take you from one step after another, but you're taught to shelve that when you're in school, right? And that's why the critics come to you and say, when your kid is like 6, they say, well, what about algebra? Like, well, I think we got a few years. You can always kind of laugh and say that. I mean, because that kind of dismisses it. And you can say, 6, that's about first grade. I think I can do that. Just talking their language sometimes, and that helps. The other thing is, remember, that because of that school conditioning that we all have, everybody wants to be like, and it's a human nature thing. Nobody wants to be dismissed. But when you give this strength and you show that you know what you're doing, you've considered what they're saying, you'll cross that bridge when you get there and get back to them. You can go ahead and kind of be in charge of the conversation instead of them being in charge, because that's kind of what school does a lot of. It teaches you for this kind of jockeying of who's calling the shots. And so you call the shots when it comes to this homeschooling thing, and you end that conversation if you need to, because your choice to homeschool or unschool your child is not up for debate. It is not up for a family vote that is outside of just your little nuclear family. They don't get a say. And so, sure, as family members, we listen to them because we love them and we know that they are coming from concern and lack of education on the topic. So we have more compassion for them, but that doesn't mean we let them make our choices. We can either choose to say, hey, I got this. Hey, if this is something that you want to talk more about, I have a couple of articles if you want to read them. If that's really a genuine concern on their part. And then you can talk to them like that and just say, I've been reading about this for a long time. I don't know that we can have a really great discussion about it right here at the Thanksgiving table, or wherever, that you just be in charge of the conversation. And that may be a really different family role for you. Lots of times people that are choosing this, they're kind of new parents. And so the idea of being a new parent is that you're stepping out of that, I'm the daughter, I'm the sister, I'm the little one, I don't know stuff, and everybody else takes care of me. And now you're moving into, no, I'm taking care of this little crowd and we're doing all right. And you have to shift your role. You have to become the person of, I'm my child's advocate. I'm the one doing this kind of exploration. I have no judgment on what anybody else is doing. I just know that for my family, this is what we're going to do for a little while. And so having that kind of confidence, even if it's like inside you're like, I don't know, it will slow them down on their jabs, because they just won't be able to get through. And there's a thing that we've always talked about, is called pass the bean dip. And I think it must come from I think of it like church socials where you have potlucks and people end up talking about politics or something that they don't want to talk about in front of other people because we're trying to keep on in the common interest area. And so instead of going into the subject, they say, could you pass the bean dip? What's in that? That is so good. Oh, I'll get back to that. And then they stay with this pass the bean dip thing from a potluck. So sometimes you'll be on a Facebook group or in an email list and you're talking about critics or naysayers and somebody just writes pass the bean dip. That's what they're referring to. They're saying, sometimes just a little deflection is what's needed, because oftentimes our critics, because we have critics that are super into our lives and we have critics that are they're like drive-by critics. They don't really care what your answer is. They just want to say what they want to say. And truth is, they really would rather talk about their kids. So it's always a good thing. Like, tell me what he's doing. I saw on Facebook you had this picture. Y'all went somewhere. Tell me more about that. And so that is sometimes another deflection technique, is to turn the conversation to something that they are going to be able to shine at, because people love that. Because that's sometimes what's happening too. We're getting into this comparison, because that happens in families, and that even happens inside you a little bit, where you've been watching the cousins and they're doing these things and your guys are not doing those things, and you're like, So if you can work a little more, then what that means is that you need to read some more about how children following their own paths, how important that is, and how not making those comparisons, because everybody has their own path to follow. Everybody has their own talents and skill sets and goals for the future. Those are all so individualized. And that's the thing that school can't do. School can't let you be as individualized as unschooling can let a kid be. So that's what you're offering. And so when you can take some time and really think about your why am I doing this? Why does this matter? Why am I putting us through this? Because when you read more, it's because you see the value. You see what all the educational research that is done, research about learning, research about how kids are, how it doesn't get to be implemented in a school, but it can be implemented in your home. And those are the kinds of things that you can read more about and talk more with people that have done this, and you'll be able to feel more confident when you understand your why. Nobody should do anything that doesn't resonate with them. Don't do something because, hey, Sue's kids turned out okay. Don't do that, because everybody's kids are different. And you need to get okay with what's happening in your home, with your dynamic that's happening there. And then you can move forward from a really stronger place. So that's part of the problem that happens in school. It's all about comparison. It's all about competition. It's not really about, don't think independently, don't think individually, think, here's the goal. That may not be your goal. So with unschooling, you can deal more with what your goal is. So sometimes I've gotten kind of off track. So I want to get back to this idea about what to do more with those critics. And sometimes what you need to do is pre-plan what you're going to say. Pre-plan some handy little statements that will change the conversation, like pass the bean dip. We've thought about that. I've read a lot about that. Or, oh, thanks for mentioning that. That's really, you're at the park and kids are playing with everybody. And somebody says, have you thought about socialization? Oh, yeah, that's such an important thing. But you could say, yeah, that's such an important thing. That's why we're here. Or you could say, yeah, school is exactly why. It's exactly the socialization we want to avoid. You engage like that, and then it's just going to be one-upping, and you don't want to do that. So, you may be in a mood that day. And if that's the case, I have a blog post that I did 50 comebacks for people. And most of them are things you probably wouldn't want to say. But if you're having one of those days, you might. And I'll put the link in here. So I'll put the link in here that goes straight to that list. I've got 20 of them that are all about socialization, and then some more that are all about just in general when people are being critical, and some pretty funny answers that you can give people. And sometimes just reading those makes you feel more comfortable and more confident that you're I can think it, I don't have to say it. I can think of some funny stuff. And then you don't necessarily have to engage, because that engagement, then it keeps going until it finally finds a little weak spot. So I would, especially if in your first year or two, I wouldn't engage about it with strangers. I would just be I'll think about that. And then, oh gosh, he just fell. I gotta go. And change the subject. The other part of this, because we're getting to our 30-minute mark, the other part of this I wanted to talk about really quickly is the idea of helping your kids through it, because those critics, when they can't get to you, they sometimes go through the kids. And that is so uncool, but it is so typical. If it's kid to kid, which sometimes happens because the cousin's kids hear your sister talk about it, and so then they say stuff to your kids. So helping them with that conversation, that might be good. And maybe it's things because have you ever seen where the kids are well, but do you know 7 times 8? So have them memorize some really big number of a times table type of thing, so that they're but 968 times 25? And then have them memorize the answer. So that check it on your phone. Yeah. Or do you know the capital of Angola, or the capital of Malaysia, or the capital of Bolivia? Or do you know how to spell and then look up what the spelling word champion won with last year, and say, do you know how to spell the spelling word champion's word? And then say what it is, and then know how to spell it. And because sometimes with kids, it's just a quick little thing. But if like your kid is, as happened to mine one time, if your kid is trapped in the back seat of a car and the mom of your other friends says, so how do you like that? Is that really, do you have any friends? Do you just sit around the table? What? I can't even imagine, just like that. The best answer for that is to say, Mom said that when you have questions like this or you start to quiz me, that you should bring it up with her. Because, man, that'll shut it down. Not only have you taught the kid how to close the conversation, which is incredibly empowering, but you have told that person that's doing the quizzing, we've been talking about you. We've been talking about what to do when people like you come at us. And nobody really likes that or quite knows what to do with it. So it does tend to stop it. So I would wholeheartedly recommend that. If they're trapped in a car, they obviously can't skip off. But if they are just somewhere out and about, it's really easy for a kid to be able to say, Mom says to take it up with her. It's easy for them to then have the back door to get out of there. So they don't have to worry about not being polite or that they're going to, be in trouble for being rude. And so instead they're like, cool, all right, bye. And that's that. So arming your kids is kind of important because they haven't done the reading you're doing. They don't necessarily know what you're up to or why you're doing this, but they may face some critics. And that would be really helpful for you to show them how to get out the side door, Okay. So also with these handouts, I want you to think about because lots of times this is the thing, that if you think about who has some criticisms, what are their concerns, and how can I deal with it? And so if you can kind of write that down, it stops all that swirling in your head. Because I know for me that if I don't write it down, I just like swirl into this disaster mode. And whereas if I just write it down, it's like, oh, yeah, solution. Got it. So I think that this will help you. And think about what are some techniques that you've used in the past that help you when subjects are difficult. Certainly this isn't the only time you've ever differed with people in your life, right? So why are you taking this to heart? And so I think that sometimes why you're taking it to heart is you need more knowledge. You need more support. You need to strengthen that foundation so that you can go ahead and deal with it. And so, bring your questions over to the Facebook group. Bring your questions to the little private coaching group where we can really kind of take it apart and figure it out. And so those are some options for you to get more support. And then read more. Read more about unschooling. Read more about the reasons that you want to do this. Strengthen your why. Strengthen your why is this important to me? Because what you'll see is that as you get more confident, the critics start to fall away. And as time goes on, because, sometimes it's a time thing, because when everybody's kids are like in that 4 to 7 year old range, they're younger, and everybody has this vision of what it's going to be like down the road. You got no idea. So here you are, taking this other path because you want to have more time with your kids. You want to give them these opportunities. You are going to choose this path, and they're going to put them in school, and they're going to do the PTA, and they're going to do all their stuff, and time's going to move forward. And I guarantee you, some of those people that are your relatives or close friends are going to run into some trouble at school. Their kid isn't going to be cooperating. They're not going to like a teacher. They're going to kind of resist something because that's what happens. Usually, not usually, in the past, you would run into those options and you wouldn't know you had an option. You would run into those problems and you wouldn't know there were options. You would think, oh, I'm stuck. I got to stay here till I'm 18. But you doing this shows people there are options. You may not do it like me, but you don't have to do it like that. And so what happens is you end up being kind of a beacon, of light, that you can show that there's a different way. And that doesn't mean that's your goal to be the beacon of unschooling. But for the people that are close to you, you'll see that next thing you know, those people that were critical when your kid was 6, when they're 13, they're coming to you saying, so tell me a little more about that. How does that work? Can I do that? Is this possible? How did you do this? You just have to kind of ride through it, because that's like everything. Time changes things. So you just stay confident where you are. And my experience is that some of those critics have trouble later down the line, and they are really kind of glad to be able to pick your brain. They may not choose to do this, but sometimes knowing that there are alternatives that are viable, and then when they see that your kids are having fun and they're okay, that's something that is reassuring to them, and that they might try something different. So, I could go on like this for hours. Do you have any? I'm gonna read through the comments. If you have questions, we can do 5 or 10 minutes of specific questions if anybody has any. Let's see if I see any. We unschooled last year, and now this year I'm considering going back to a set curriculum, and it's definitely rooted in fear. Yeah, I think that I have an article, and I'll put it on there over at my blog. If you go suepatterson.com/blog, I have a page that has a list of all of the unschooling blog posts that are kind of favorites for people. And one of them is called The Curriculum is a Crutch. So you might want to read it. And certainly I've used that as a crutch and then got rid of it. But it kind of frames it differently for you, and that might be really helpful for you, Stacy. Let's see. Jessie says, I told my mother-in-law that I preferred her to be my daughter's teacher because I know she comes from a place of love and truly values what her granddaughter learns about. She quit her crap after that. Okay. Yeah, I think that sometimes people, I don't want to use the word bullying because real bullying happens, but people get pushy. They pass their boundaries. They step over them. They think those boundaries don't apply to them or something. And that's when you have to change that role, and you don't have to be rude, but you can be like, no, this part here, this is not your area. So, let's see. Jamie says, I love listening to unschoolers because I'm a bit schooly and it helps me relax. I had a friend like that when we were up in Alaska, and she said that she loved having unschoolers as friends because they could think of real creative ways to learn stuff, or they could do what you're saying, help her relax on, oh my gosh, they don't know this. Well, that's okay. The Patterson kids don't either, and they seem to be doing fine. And also we were always available to do, they were a unit study family. So they would do stuff. And then on Fridays, they would have kind of a party to celebrate all their real schooly stuff. So they always knew the unschoolers would come to the party on Friday. So we had toga parties when they had done Greek mythology, and we joined them for that. And, my kids got a lot out of it because they'd never been to a toga party, and they learned a little bit about Greek mythology. And so one of my kids started reading about Greek mythology from the party, as opposed to the days of learning from that curriculum that really is just like a pouring and then it's spraying off, like the hose that goes on a person's head and then the water sprays off. It's not getting in them. It's only getting in them if they're interested. And so maybe starting with a party is the right way to go. Or maybe just having the party and, it's like throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks. And that's where you go with it. So I'm glad you're here, Jamie. Cassandra says, I'm so thankful that my family has been shockingly supportive. Their total confidence in me has definitely squelched many of my initial fears. Not to say I don't still have some fears. That's so fabulous, because that really shows a good, healthy, I'm an adult, I'm making some decisions, and that it's a healthy relationship, that they let you make decisions that differ from them. And that's important, because sometimes our parents feel like our decisions are a criticism of what happened, of what their decision was. They put us in school was good enough for you. Why do you're like, well, it was good enough then. You didn't know a lot of alternatives, and they maybe didn't really exist as easily as they do exist now. So I think that's, you have to recognize that sometimes people think that. Sometimes parents feel defensive. Are you saying you hated your childhood? So maybe if they're not actually saying that to you, you might say something reassuring to them. Think compassionately. So, this just wasn't like that then. Even though school still had bullying and had trying to keep people in the boat, move from point A to point B and be more conforming. All those things still existed back then, but people didn't talk about alternatives. And so you could just say to your mom, who might feel like, are you saying you hated your childhood? Just I had a great childhood. Or I had it's very different now. And we have a lot of different alternatives. And you can always add this, I loved that you raised somebody who dared to be different, who dared to do whatever was best for their child, because you role modeled that for me. You showed me, be confident, do this, do what you need to do with your life. She may not have ever articulated that to you, but something in your childhood allows you to go ahead and step off the beaten path. So give her some credit for it, because what does it hurt? If it helps her feel a little bit better about her choice, so she can get on board with you having a different choice. I'm not saying you have a terrible childhood and lie to her and say it was great. But if you have an average childhood, she was doing the best she could, and that's always a good thing to tell people too. I know you were doing the best you could. I never doubted your intentions. I never doubted that you loved me. I always knew that. So you can say those kinds of things to your parents, and it helps them feel more comfortable with you doing something different. The other thing, just real quickly, because it has to do with dealing with those. Sometimes your parents, the grandparents of your children, they need they need some pictures and things of your kids happily engaging with other children and learning things and stuff, so that they can share at work or at their ladies club meeting or at whatever is going on. And so I've known some people that set up like a private Facebook group that is closed or secret, and it's only family members. And that way you put in all the pictures of your kids building a volcano or going on some cool thing at the museum, or you put those things up there that reassures them that your kids are learning and growing and happy and thriving. That's what they want to see. And we gave because we were pre-Facebook when my kids were little and my mom was most concerned about it, I gave her a little grandma brag book, that had pictures of them doing things with groups, because she was all about the socialization and worried that they weren't going to get enough friends. So I always made sure we had pictures of kids galore everywhere. So that's something to think about, that you might want to preemptively get that out to them so that they can feel reassured. And, when they're reassured, they don't come at you. And that's really the goal, right? Let's see. So Cassandra says pop quizzing children can be so disrespectful. Cornering them definitely is. Oh, absolutely. Hope says you don't have to answer for a choice you've made for your child, and you should teach your children the same, to live life for you and not for others. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's perfectly fine to say to your kids, this is what we think is best for you. This is you get to develop and grow, and here's some of my why, and share that with them. Let's see. So, Hope, when you're saying you feel like we're over justifying, I think it just depends on, I'm not sure exactly which piece you were referring to, but I think that it depends on the situation. And you're absolutely right that you don't have to justify any of it. But when you have family members that are in your life a lot, sometimes it takes, it's not black and white. Nothing really is in life and in parenting. And sometimes it takes giving a little bit, or offering some information, especially if somebody is genuinely interested. Why not go ahead and they're coming to you from a concern, and then it's an uneducated concern. So you're going to educate them a little bit. And I don't think of that as justifying. It's not like, to me, what justifying is saying, here's what we're doing. So are you on board? So are you okay? Do you like my choice? I'm not saying that at all. At all. I'm saying get confident in yourself. Assess whether people need more information or no information, and then proceed accordingly. So I'll read down below if you have something else that you are thinking. Let's see. Leslie says maybe they don't have to do it the way I'm doing it, but they can at least realize that there are different ways of doing things. Love it. Yeah, exactly. Lissa says, I've enjoyed these not back to school talks. I needed this. Thank you. You're welcome. Jessie says, I was mainly pointing out that it's possible to involve family members with certain things so that they can at least have that feeling and gratification that comes from watching your loved ones learn and develop new skills. Absolutely. Heather says, we always start with a party. I love it. My kind of family. Let's see. Sandra says, my mom wished she could do something like this with me. So maybe this feels like a fulfillment of her with her grandsons. Maybe. Leslie says, the question, otherwise supportive unschooling hubby gets a little freaked out that our artsy kid is not interested in learning math. And it's always math, isn't it? The other day he said he's worried she'll be 13 or 14 and not able to do multiplication. I think he knows in his heart that she will learn math when it's meaningful for her, but ideas on ways to reassure him. I think that your kid is probably going to always have a phone on them. They'll always be able to do whatever computation needs to be done. And accurately. The engineers I know, they don't do their job because they know they're handwriting the formulas on the piece of paper. They have apps and plugins and things that make sure that it's not up to human accuracy. So remember that sometimes we overvalue those computational skills, because I will tell you that a lot of kids are going to just learn multiplication because of things that they do, games that they play. My daughter sold Girl Scout cookies, so she knew her threes upwards and downwards, because the boxes were $3 a piece. It has to do with relevance. Your husband probably should look at some more articles on what's wrong with schools. Or, like read a little John Taylor Gatto, read a little Alfie Kahn, things like that will help him see that even if they don't know 7 times 6 off the top of their head, it is not worth it to, the risk. When you do the risk-benefit analysis, knowing a couple of multiplication facts isn't that important when they have access to it? And every piece of information that they would memorize in a school, they carry around with them with a constantly updated reference. So I think that sometimes we have to look at the bigger picture. Also, when you have a spouse that is not on board, you have to kind of pull back a little bit in the talk to them. Find out what their fears really are. And sometimes we get not over, but we get really enthusiastic and we just plow on past them. And they're kind of still left back at the gate. And you need to help them learn a little bit more and get a little bit more on board. Give them some examples of how you didn't sit down at the table and teach it, and yet they know it. Or examples of, don't you remember them teaching us stuff? We passed the test and we have we don't recall it at all. And so those are real life things that when you are teaching at a person, that does not guarantee their learning, So I think that when we focus, whereas unschooling focuses on the learner, we're going from where the learner sits as opposed to where the teacher sits coming at them, where the learner sits and what are they curious about. And we have trust that one thing will lead to another. And if at any point they feel like, oh, I have gaps, because don't we all, they can fill in whatever gap they need to because they have access and they know how to find resources. So those kinds of skills are so much more important than whether you know the sevens, for the times tables. Catherine says, hi, just got here. How do you explain unschooling to professionals and therapists or DDD? I don't know what DDD is, but I'm assuming it's some other kind of professional. You can write in there and let me know. But I don't. I share only on a need-to-know basis. And, if you have I know you probably have a long-time relationship with the therapist, you might give them some articles to read about learning and about what's going on if you trust them. If you have to always remember that those professionals are just people that happen to have a skill set and now they're your professional. But they're people with their own agendas, with their own defensiveness, with their own kids, with their own life and baggage and all of that. And so you have to assess whether they are open to what you want to share, because this is a vulnerability that you're going to share with them, because you may have a child that isn't progressing along that linear path the way that school kids look like they're progressing. I will tell you that I had a kid that went ahead and took community college classes, and she didn't do great on the assessment tests. But so she took developmental classes and in math and reading and writing. And she always said, I traded 12 years of school for 3 semesters of community college. And she's in the saddest part was I was sitting in a classroom full of kids that had gone to school, full of adults, young adults that had sat through that for 12 years and didn't retain it, because that's exactly what we're talking about, that people don't retain things that aren't that interesting to them. And when you step off the conveyor belt, which is, what school is just kind of conveyor belting them along. And when you step off, then you start to see whether, what is your real life need or what's important to you. And so we're pulling them off the conveyor belt a little bit early. And that way they can have access to their real life where they are, and they'll learn and grow based on things that they're interested in. So as for therapists and doctors, I often just say homeschooling. I don't say unschooling, because a lot of people have kind of a visceral reaction to it. They're like, oh, she thinks she's all that, or, oh, you're so radical, or whatever. I come from the mainstream world, suburbia. I totally get what those people are thinking. I don't agree, but I get it. So I just say homeschooling, and I say, yeah, we do a more experiential, individualized learning program. And they're like, oh, sounds great. if they ever come up to you and say, what is unschooling or what is that, then this is going to sound interesting, but I say it's kind of like the gifted and talented program of homeschooling. It's kind of, like if you're in a gifted and talented program, you're really diving into a particular interest, and it may not like exactly correlate with what's happening at that grade level, but the gifted and talented program is doing it. And that's kind of what we're doing. We're not really coordinating with what's grade levels. We are diving into what they're interested in. So you can always say unschooling is the gifted and talented program of homeschooling. Sometimes the mainstream people they like that. Okay, so I think, oh gosh, I slide this down. Jessie says, yeah, do coding instead. Department of Developmental Disabilities. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because I think kids with special needs so benefit from unschooling, because I think that meeting them where they are and like not trying to get them on some conveyor belt that other kids with their disabilities are. Everybody is so individualized, and special needs kids really are too. And it's just a different set of abilities. And so meeting them where they are and moving them forward seems like the logical thing to me. I think that when they're younger, a lot of developmental therapists are really about getting them okay for school, getting them ready for school. And your guys don't have to have that. Your guys don't need a giant push. They can wait and learn to read when they learn to read. They can wait and learn some of the skills a little bit later when their brain is really ready to do it. And so I think that's kind of, I just always think that unschooling is the perfect fit. I mean, this is a perfect fit for anybody because we all learn like this. It just really has to do with whether you can get the baggage out of your head, whether you can get your fears to not run your life. Because learners learn, that's part of our hardwiring. And whether we're able to kind of tap into it and see it as the adventure, it's kind of like glass is half empty or glass is half full. Half empty, we've got to get these things done and we have a certain time frame and all of that. Half full is we have adventures to be on. Where should we go next? Let's see. Leslie liked my gifted and talented program idea. So no one calls CPS because you're not giving your kids what they need. Oh, I will say that when you have kids in a system that is more mainstream, like you've got therapists and doctors and you're going to, you're dealing with that you have to walk a little more carefully. Those of us that don't have that on a regular basis have not really anything to worry about. Most of the cases that I've seen that somebody is calling CPS, it has to do with divorce and you've got a differing parenting situation. Or sometimes that person is being targeted for other reasons in their neighborhood or maybe, that's usually the case. But when you have a kid that's in being in the path, in the line of sight of developmental therapists, often, I think you have to walk a little more carefully. And I think that sometimes what happens, what would be good is to point out how they learn things or what they learned or some sign of progress so that you're not just waiting for them to figure it out. But maybe you want to show them ahead of time, oh my gosh, she can do this and now she can do that, or something along those lines. So that might be something. And, we can always hop on the phone if you need to and figure out what specifically kinds of things could maybe be more helpful at helping that therapist understand they're not being neglected at all. They're just not on the path that most of their other clients are on. So let's see. So support coordinators from the developmental thing actually take down an hour by hour schedule of your day. I don't know what to do with that. Katie had an auditory processing disorder for a while, and we did a little bit of therapy and then we stopped. So, I'm not saying she should never have therapy because I don't really know much about it at all. But I am saying that you should evaluate whether there's really a strong need for it and how you should be in charge of it as opposed to them in charge of it. And if you can't be in charge of it, maybe you can get therapy somewhere else where you're seen as a valuable member of the team, maybe. Yeah, I don't think you can expect other professionals to get it. I just don't think they are geared towards it. But I do think that they are geared towards learning, and that if you show them examples of how that your child has learned, that will be helpful. Dacia says, I know what you're talking about, Catherine. My daughter has Down syndrome, and I've encountered some of the same obstacles with the professionals. Well, we all have. We all have taken our kids to a doctor, and they're like, oh, he's not in school. And in your 120-minute time frame, you can't really say, yeah, we're just fine with it. Luckily, it's a much more accepted way to educate now, that it's something that shows up all over the place, and we have more opportunities to find different professionals to work with. We are not just limited to the one doctor in town. So all right, so I think if you have more questions, Catherine, we can talk about it in the private group, or we can you can always jump on my calendar and we can talk more specifically about your family and what's going on. But use the handouts that you got in email and check out the links that I gave you in the back about Naysayers. And I will put on here the link to those 50 comebacks that you might want for, I'll put these links too, so that it's easy for you to access it. So, so that's it for day 4. Gosh, we went for a whole hour on naysayers and critics. Do we have a little fear or what? It's just real life, and we were conditioned. We grew up in that, and now we're doing something different, and that is sometimes hard to do. And I don't want to just blow past it and act like, oh, come on, just figure it out and do it. Let's talk about it, because that's how fear gets dealt with. We pull it out into the light and we look at it, and then we can start to dismantle it. What parts can we make changes on? We can't control everything, but we can control a heck of a lot more than if we just stick our head in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist. So think about your why. Think about arming your kids with some answers in case they get into some tough situations. Think about your own responses that you want to have, looking at evaluating whether or not the person is really coming at you with good intentions, or are they just kind of doing their little defensive smart alecky comment on the side. They're going to get completely different responses from you. And do your own work about dealing with your fear and dealing with your lack of knowledge, because we all have a lack of knowledge in the beginning. Excuse me. And so do some legwork on learning some more. The links will help. And you can always join the private group, and we talk about these things all the time, or hop on the calendar with me. So those are options that you can get support. So knowledge and support, that's the way out of this. So you guys have a great rest of the day. Tomorrow we're going to talk about how to not have school creep into your life once you've figured out that this is what you're going to do. How do you deal with that? Because that's happening in your head. So we'll explore a little more along that line, because tomorrow will be our last day. And I will see you guys online and back here tomorrow. All right. Take care. Bye.